Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hey, youth workers, this is Doug Edwards with Youth Worker on Fire. Here we are again. This guy I've been trying to track down for a while. Now, he and I talk. Larry Stevens is an amazing person, but he's also on the go constantly. And if you've heard episode 24, you can go back and you will hear Larry Stevens. That is an amazing episode. His wife, Amanda, is a few episodes behind that, before that, actually. Somewhere between 20 and 24, which is where he was. But Larry and I have not talked in a while. He's always doing a lot of things that are world-changing. If you were to meet Larry, you would think he's just a laid-back, nice guy. But if you will listen to the other episodes, which you don't have to, we'll catch you up right here, you'll see that there's a fire burning inside that is a massive fire that reaches to great heights. You know, some of us, we talk about leadership and we talk about leadership lids. We may not talk about that. John Maxwell does. But he's got a very high leadership lid as far as I'm concerned. In other words, how high in leadership you could go. So, Larry, thank you for being here. How you doing today?
Doug, I am doing great. It's great to be back. And I have listened to your channel, and it's you have some great people on the show, so I'm honored that you would have me back.
Well, the honor is all mine. Trust me, my friend, for sure. And you're doing some just amazing stuff, and that we've talked about talking about, but we haven't gotten there yet. And by the way, he's doing this, he and Amanda are, because whatever ministry you're doing, your spouse is doing with you, whether it's on the road with you or whether it's home taking care of your children, your family, your other affairs, or whether it's with you doing it together. It's just so. He's got 4 children, 2 twin boys, a little girl, and the baby is not a baby anymore. 4th grade is a little boy, and Amanda, his wife, who we have a lot of history with. So here you are, though. You're in CRU. For those of you who are old school, those of you who are new, you know what CRU is. If you're older school, you know what Campus Crusade for Christ is. That no longer has that name. It's now CRU, CRU. And Larry is not only working for CRU, but CRU has loaned him out, I believe it's a once-a-month basis, to I Am Second. If any of you in student ministry world have used I Am Second, I used it for quite a while. It's still amazing. He's got some other things out there. He's loaned out to them because he's that valuable of a guy. He also introduced me to the movie Jesus Revolution, coming out in February. And just today we talked about one of the most high-priced Christian animation movies being produced or getting ready to be produced. And Larry, if I'm off track with any of that, straighten me out here. But let's start off with CRU and go on to I Am Second, and just the things that we talked about.
Yeah.
Just get us involved and tell us all the things that you can tell us that are happening. Don't tell us anything you can't tell, but tell everything else.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. Well, let me just start off and let you know that part of what I do is special projects with CRU, and had been doing that for many, many years with our former president, Steve Douglas, who had just actually recently passed a few weeks ago, but he was a mentor of mine. And one of the last projects Steve Douglas and I were working on was a partnership with John Maxwell and his group. And, I had always known about John Maxwell, his amazing leadership books. But when I was talking to John's leadership team, they said, oh, yeah, his real vision is that he really wants to see people come to Christ. In fact, within his own business, they have seen this year 250,000 people come to Christ through the John Maxwell Enterprise,
Wow.
and which I had no idea about. And we've met, and then I realized I had heard that John Maxwell himself has a personal mission of leading people to Christ himself. But I actually got to. They were. I went to one of their big events that they have with their coaches. About 3,000 were gathered, and John Maxwell had kind of an optional breakfast if you wanted to come and hear more about what John believes. Well, everyone showed up, and John, he gave just a great gospel presentation, and only the way he could say it. And about 300 people came forward, and I was just blown away. So that's just one of the projects that I have had a chance to work on and will continue to work on. Is projects like working with John Maxwell.
Well, of course, in evangelism and discipleship is what you're all about anyway. That's what you signed up for with CRU, and John was a pastor in San Diego before he ever started the John Maxwell Foundation and the leadership thing from the denomination I grew up in, the Wesleyan denomination. And his was one of the few large churches in the world in the Wesleyan denomination, and it was his down in San Diego. And High Point, which is 5 miles from my hometown in North Carolina. And my understanding there was a large one in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And but very few Wesleyan churches grew in that kind of evangelism and discipleship. But his church was one of them.
Yeah. So that's one of the partnerships that we've worked on. But one of the ones that we've worked on, CRU is all about partnerships. And one of the partnerships we've had is with I Am Second, which is a media ministry based out of Dallas that's gone global. And so last year they reached out to CRU and asked if I could be on their leadership team in kind of an executive on loan, just to help them be more effective in what they do and reaching folks, for Christ. And that's been a real treat. They just celebrated their 14 years in what they've done. They've filmed over 180 people just telling these compelling, high quality stories of faith. And we just completed a few months ago the story of one of the band members of Journey. His name is Jonathan Cain, and he was the keyboardist, still is. And he wrote those songs, those global songs, Don't Stop Believing, Faithfully. And he kind of tells the story of Don't Stop Believing. And it's an incredible story of faith that no one knew about until now.
Yeah, I heard that episode and saw it actually, and was a very amazing episode. Now, if you're a younger youth worker, I know you're thinking your students don't know that genre or that old band. Of course, they got a new singer over the last 5-6 years. Maybe it was shorter than that, but they're one of those bands that crosses a lot of cultural lines and a lot of time periods, timelines of history, and so still very up to date. And if you've got young musicians, it's an amazing story of faith.
It is, and I'll just tell you a little bit about it. Is when John grew up in Chicago, and he went out to L.A. to pursue music, and like most people, he kind of nothing was happening, ran out of money, so he calls his dad on a payphone from L.A. Tells his dad, I think nothing's happening. I think I'm ready to come home and give up. And his dad tells him, son, you stay where you are, don't stop believing the vision that God has in your life. And so Jonathan, he stayed, and he wrote in his writing journal, that phrase, "Don't stop believing," that he heard from those powerful words he heard from his dad. And then years, later, he joins the Journey band, and the band says to Jonathan, "Do you have anything else? We have room for one more title of our No Escape album." And John went back to his journal and saw that same phrase years ago, and that was the kernel of what became just a instant hit, and it was just incredible. And so that's just part of that of Jonathan's story that he tells in our video. But what's really amazing, after we released the video, I get a call from Hollywood, one of my friends in Hollywood, and he says, "Larry, we saw the I Am Second video. We'd love to do a movie on Journey, and the story behind the song 'Don't Stop Believing,' to where God is part of that story." And just imagine millions of people who already know the song and the band and the music, that they will watch this movie, and that they will see God in this story. And so we're praying that things will move forward toward that.
Yeah, that is amazing. And the one I want people to understand too is that you have been used in CRU to reach a lot of people. You had 16, I believe it was 1,600 chapters of CRU across the United States. You did missions in the summer, which I believe covered 31 nations. Is that right? Or was it 31 missions? I can't remember how that went.
Yeah. Yes. CRU, we have college chapters in every major college in the U.S. And we actually, our heart is to reach every campus, every student on every campus. And we actually, over the last few years, we've formed an alliance called Every Campus, to where we have many, I think over 100 partners. And our mission is that on every campus in the U.S., that there will be at least one witnessing community that's focusing on reaching students. And so it's exciting to see us really partner together with other campus organizations, other organizations around in the U.S., to really make sure every college in the U.S. has a witnessing community.
That's a big task in a lot of people. Larry, how do you do it?
Well, why don't you do it through prayer?
No, you personally. How do you do this? Because I know you're not the one who's personally doing all that. You're the one who is personally reaching out to those leaders and training and helping and being there as a shoulder to cry on and to listen to. How do you and Amanda do it?
Oh, how do we do it? Oh, well.
How do you handle life?
How do we balance it all, huh? Well, it's a kind of a dance. You kind of sometimes in life, you don't start off when like learn how to ride a bike. You're not, it takes time to figure out how to balance things, and I'm still trying to figure that out. But usually when I come home, I try to stay focused with family, trying to keep my computer out of the house, and to where I can just focus with the family. And don't always, I have an amazing wife who she will gently remind me, like, "Hey, need to focus on the kids." But so I try to have firmer boundaries, and I don't take phone calls. If someone's trying to get a hold of me on the weekend, I'll just wait and call them back on Monday. And so I'm still learning how to balance it all. But I remember sometimes you just have to give things up. You have to give things up, and I've had a few chances. I'm also the Hollywood liaison for CRU, and I've worked on over 30 Hollywood films, Doug, and And there was a season when I would be invited to be on movie set. I got a call one time. Paramount wanted me to fly out to New York to meet with Russell Crowe, the actor, and he was he was in a movie called Noah. If you remember that movie.
Oh yeah, good movie.
And they had built like a replica of the Ark somewhere in New Jersey, and they wanted me to spend a week and meet with Russell Crowe, and Amanda was pregnant with our youngest Andrew, and she was expecting any time, and I just said, I'm not going to be able to go to this one, and I had someone else go in my place. I had our New York City director go, and he had a great time. His name was Larry Christensen.
Yeah.
And that's happened 3 or 4 times where I've had a chance to meet with Sam Worthington, who was the star of Avatar for a film up in Canada, and Amanda and I were on a kind of a second honeymoon up in Colorado, and just sometimes you get these amazing opportunities, but you just have to choose which ones you want to be part of. You can't choose them all.
No, you can't choose them all, and it's tempting to. And I mean, you're a great example of of the struggle to do those things or not to do those things. And what we know, and you know this as well as I do, there's many leaders that have not said no enough, and they lose their family. They've lost their wives to divorce, and their children are angry, and that's one thing we want youth workers not to end up with. And you're a good example of that. And what you're saying is true. It's a dance. It's very difficult, and we think it's difficult, and it is in just student ministry in a church or in a parachurch organization or even volunteering. That it is a dance, and you better dance well and say no. I loved what Rick Warren said, that his mentor told him. He said, Rick, I know you want to tell me all the new things you're doing, but you know our rule. Tell me first what you're saying no to and giving up.
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to remember that, Doug.
I mean, it just hit me between the eyes when I heard that. If Rick Warren, Saddleback pastor, of course, just retired because he's sick, but still founder, still there. So here you are, you're doing the Hollywood thing. You've had chances to bounce back and forth. Nothing more valuable than your wife or kids, though. And when you keep that in perspective like you are, it's easier to say no than if you didn't. Because, God's going to judge us on how we did with our families more than he is on how many times. And so I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I'm telling the people listening. Tell me about your next level stuff. Was there anything more you wanted to say about that?
No, that was really good, Doug. I just came back from Texas, and I on some business and trips and meetings, and I brought my one of my oldest sons, Michael. He's 14, and he came with me for a week. And he was part of almost every meeting I had there, and it was really good. I'm really glad he came with me, and we were on a road trip together, and so that's my goal now, is trying to bring my kids along in what I'm doing, let them see the ministry and the work that I'm doing. And I remember when my dad, he owned a company, an insurance company, and I just loved going into his office and listening to him have these meetings over the phone, and I just loved to watch him watch him work. And I'm trying to do more of that. You mentioned Rick Warren. You're right. He just retired from Saddleback to actually take over something else called Finishing the Task.
Wow.
And it's an initiative to reach every people group, unreached, unengaged people group in the world. And it's been going on for about 20 years. Rick has been a big part of that. and he I don't know if you knew, but you know, we really didn't take fulfilling the Great Commission, reaching every person, bringing Jesus to every place, to every person, until about 20 years ago. And we just didn't have the information, the data to know where we needed to go. But since then, we've identified and adopted every people group in the world, and now we're in the process of engagement and bringing. How do we bring the gospel? How do we create something that's sustainable to these people groups? So many people believe that we can honestly say that we have fulfilled the Great Commission in the next 20 years.
Wow, that's and right on task, right on time. If you're up on the end times, we've been there since 1948. Some people would go, Doug, yeah, you were about 100 years old at that point, right? No, I wasn't. I'm old. So I tell people I'm 300 years old. That's in youth worker years. But anyway, and we talk about, when the Civil War or the Revolutionary War was, George Washington and I were very close. But anyway, but yeah, that's amazing because we are in that, and I didn't know that particular point, but every year since my middle school year, and I talk about one of my mentors, my pastor, Dr. Fred Hill, who's also a Wesleyan pastor, also a professor at High Point College or University. And so ever since the 6-Day War, if you know anything about that, and a lot of our youth workers are too young for that, we've been anticipating and looking, and every time we turn a corner, we think, okay, this is it. This is it. This is it. But then there's always more pieces to the puzzle, and now you're telling us about that other piece to the puzzle.
Well, and that was, when the disciples, the last words that Jesus said to his disciples was to go and and make disciples and tell the nations about me. And now that the disciples are no longer here, that mantle falls on us. It falls on you and me and the church now. And so I'm so proud of Rick and CRU and Steve Douglas. He was a big part of this, and so many other of these organizations that have come together. They've partnered and they've focused on the of reaching and getting the gospel into every people group, unreached people group in the world. It's amazing. It's historic. This is something that's never happened in the history of the church, and it's happening now.
Yes. And I can't remember which leader was talking about all the different people groups in the world years ago, and probably more than 20 years ago. And to hear what you're saying to me is just pretty amazing. So let's go on, because you're doing more. And I want to talk about the Jesus Revolution movie, but not before, in case we run out of time, before we talk about your animation movie that you're working on, what's happening about you going to Cape Town, and on it goes. Fill in all those blanks. Tell everyone that's never heard of what you're talking about, what we're talking about. Tell them what I'm talking about.
Well, I'm happy to. It's not public yet, so
are we able to talk about it? Should we not talk about it?
I'll share a little bit. But I do know that
because this will be public in about 2 months.
Okay. Yes. Well, let me just say that the most Rick Warren said the most effective evangelistic tool in the history of the church is the Jesus film,
which was CRU, Campus Crusade for Christ, right?
Yeah, the Jesus film is under CRU, and it was a film that was made 40 years ago. Can you imagine a film that last year in 2021, 18 million people trusted Christ, indicated decisions for Christ through the Jesus film, 760 million views last year. I can't think of another film that has been that effective for leading people for Christ. And this year they've translated their 2,000 languages this year, a few months ago. And so the vision is to animate that film, and with Disney quality, high quality, Pixar quality, an animation feature film to reach a new generation of families today, to where they will see this character of Jesus on film and connect to his warmth, his love, his compassion, his empathy. And animation is really huge right now, and it's just, we think this is the next big thing. And what's exciting is what's exciting is we are, this is going to be the most expensive faith film ever made. But what's exciting is, we're going to be able to reach a new generation of families and overlay with existing 2,000 languages that we've translated. And so within a few years, every person is going to be able to listen to the story of Jesus in their own heart language. And that's pretty powerful.
That is amazingly powerful. And now, what part of that are you not supposed to tell? Because it sounds like we got a pretty good picture that this thing is going to happen. Is that what you can tell? Is that what you told us there? And the animation part that you're talking about too, to me, is how are you getting this Pixar quality? I mean, are these guys coming out of Pixar? I mean, you don't have to tell us. Just for those people who are in media that are doing this, just to help them understand how God is moving, and just like this, He is moving anyway. For this to happen is an incredible movement of God. I mean, and to tell us what happened with the Jesus film over a period of 40 years, I mean, it's accredited with a lot of things I'm not even going to talk about now because I may be wrong about some of them. But there's some worldwide events that film is accredited with.
Yes. Yeah. What's really neat is that the Jesus film has over 1,900 partners. There's 1,900 other ministries that use the Jesus film as a tool, to reach people for Christ. And actually, I'll just share with you, this is really amazing. But in Texas last week, for ESL, this church has an ESL program, and one of the pastors there said, "Wouldn't it be great if we showed them the Jesus film? That way they could understand what they're learning. And what if they could listen to the Jesus film all at the same time? 16 languages. There's 16 languages represented, and that they could watch the movie and listen to it at the same time in their own language." And this was the very first time this has ever happened, and it's because of technology. There's new tech now that will allow you to make that happen. And so we did that last week in Texas. Isn't that exciting?
That's incredibly exciting. And tell me about ESL, though. Tell me what ESL is, just for us dummies.
Well, I think it's like an English language program. So you're you've come to the U.S. but your first language is not English. It may be Arabic, it may be Spanish, and so people will be part of ESL to learn English.
Oh, that's you're talking about things that I think most of us don't know is going on, which was why I was excited when you and I talked a little bit earlier tonight. By the way, Larry's doing this with 3 middle school children in his house and a 4th grader. So realize that he and Amanda have their hands full, and which I told him tonight. Middle schoolers, I think, are the pinnacle of who we need to pour ourselves into, because life decisions are made in middle school, and most of the time we as parents and leaders squelch it because we go, oh, they're so crazy, they're all this, but it's the most creative time in their life. So in his house, and here he took one of them to a week worth of meetings. One of my regrets, Larry, is that the sabbaticals I took when I went out to California, went to Chicago to see some of the best, Atlanta, did take my daughter to Atlanta, but I wished I'd taken each one of my boys to each one of those trips where I spent time at Saddleback and time at other places that were just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And so my hat's off to you that you've done that you're doing that. Now, they've got to do other things with me. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't that we didn't do some amazing things, but I regret those times where I could have spent an entire week with them each individually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Doug. I'm still on that journey, and I find myself reading more parenting books than I do leadership books. You tend to read what you need, like what you're needing right now, and I'm just looking for all sorts of wisdom, parenting wisdom, and I have to give a shout out to Tony Dungy's ministry, All Pro Dad. That's been so helpful, and there's some amazing parenting podcasts out there, almost famous, and there's just a lot of good stuff out there.
Well, I'll tell you the amazing thing to me. I don't know if I should use amazing every time I turn around, but anyway, I think not amazing. I'm not so sure that parenting books aren't a better way to look at all of life anyway. Because the most crucial time in all of our life was what happened to us while we were adolescents and in our homes. What happens in those parenting times is what's molding the future of our world. And I think it molds the future of our ministry. So I think when you're in those parenting books, you're probably being trained for the greatest ministry of all time, and that your ministry around you is being affected. My thought, that's just me, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that I want to be a great dad. I'm working on it. I had a great dad, and but I'm learning that I have, when you're married, that you have to parent together with your wife and your spouse, and you have to come up with a plan that works for you, and so I'm bringing the best I can from how I was raised, and Amanda's bringing the best she can. She has amazing parents, and she grew up in an amazing Christian home, and so but these times are different. These times are hard, and we have to know the times, and we have to know how do we prepare them. Can't shelter them forever, so how do we slowly introduce them and get them ready for what's ahead?
Well, one thing that you have done is that you and Amanda have married the right people, because both of you have that goal. It may seem very tough at times. Both of you are very driven people in very different ways. Your intelligence level is beyond belief. You both were seeking God before you met. Your kids have a good running chance here. They're not doing too bad. A lot worse things have happened to a lot better people that have come out that God has used. And so, Jesus Revolution, speaking of things bad happening in the world, and then here we've got this movie that came from when I grew up in the 60s, and I didn't get to watch the whole movie yet. There was a screening, and you set me up with that. Wasn't able to do that, but I watched the trailer, several trailers I believe there was on it anyway, and it was just, I knew what was happening. I knew what it was about. Amazing story. Tell me how you end up being involved in Jesus Revolution and what it's about.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm the Hollywood liaison for CRU, and I've worked on over 30 theatrical films, and really, students their worldviews are shaped by what they see by media. So we want to be in that space. We want to be able to be part of the narrative, the conversation, and so that's why I'm attached to film and want to be part of how do we use film to reach students and help shape their worldviews toward Christ. And so the Jesus Revolution, it's a faith-based film, and it's the story of the Jesus movement in the '70s, and it's really interesting. It's it kind of shows you the hippies movement and how they were trying everything, freedom, and let's just do whatever we want to do, drugs and sex, and you see the stories of some of these hippies who they um, they were empty. They were searching for truth and meaning and for more, and they realized the hippie movement wasn't it was not the solution, and they realized that Jesus was the solution, the answer, and to have really fulfillment and meaning in life. And it really it kind of tells just a little bit of the story of, and it really happened. There's this huge movement out in LA, and it kind of tells the story. But it's a great film. We think it could be a catalyst to reach a new generation, kind of a new movement of Jesus. And if you know, it's really interesting. Even like a few weeks ago, The Chosen came out in theaters, and it was number 3 on opening weekend. Can you imagine the story of Jesus opening number 3 in the country? That's incredible.
No, and it is incredible. Of course, it's godlike. Once again, we unfortunately see that as incredible when we know that God can do whatever He wants in whatever way He wants. But Colleen and I've been watching The Chosen, going through the series, and we're just amazed, as long as we've been in ministry and things and life, that how it's bringing scriptures back to us in a real way. You're hearing Jesus differently. You're hearing the disciples and their conversations differently when you're reading scripture itself. I mean, we're just, I'm glad you brought that up.
So the Jesus film's coming out, the Jesus Revolution's coming out in February. And, I've been fortunate. We kind of came up with an idea years ago where we give a students a free ticket, 2 free tickets. And if you agree to invite a non-church friend to come with you to see the film and to have a conversation afterwards. And that has been so successful. We've done that probably for 4 or 5 years. We've given away over 1,000 movie tickets a year. And who knows, maybe we might do the same thing for this one. We're still trying to decide what we want to do around the film, as far as strategy and that was one of my favorite. That's a movie we're working on now. There's another film coming out. You haven't even seen the trailer. It's the story of George Foreman, and it's what we call a crossover, and so it's going to be distributed by Sony Studio, but yet it's also the film will also talk about some of the faith side of George Foreman. So I think that's going to be coming out in April.
And for those who don't, if you're not into heavyweight fighting and the big guys and all of that, give us a little bit of background of what George Foreman was about. And you've seen him. If you've lived at least 20 years, you've seen some George Foreman commercials somewhere along the way.
Yeah, well, that kind of made him pretty famous, the George Foreman, and I can't remember who it was. I think here's kind of a crazy story: is I think they were offering the personality of the grill to several people, and George Foreman he said yes to doing it, And I think even Evander Holyfield, they asked him, but by the time he called back, George Foreman said, yes, I'll do it. And that made him more famous than even probably his boxing. But
yes, absolutely. Well, he's on television almost every hour of every day with this commercial of the George Foreman grill, right?
Yeah.
Great prize fighter, though. Fought Muhammad Ali. Who else did he fight? Or did he not fight Muhammad? I thought he did.
No. Okay, no. I think the
Evander Holyfield. Who else?
No, actually, I think this. I heard a story and it could be in the film, but so Muhammad Ali did fight George Foreman and lost. And
that was his first loss, wasn't it?
Yeah, he thought this guy is too ugly. He kept on saying this guy is too ugly to be that good. And Muhammad Ali didn't prepare for his fight because he thought there's just no way someone that ugly could beat me. And
that's right. Muhammad Ali was kind of a pretty boy. Yeah.
Yeah. But someone had told me that the story was, and that, sometimes you get overconfident, and it's and that's the story of Rocky, right? Is that this guy came from nowhere, from poverty, and ended up beating the champion. Of course, that was a fictional story, but that was
kind of George Foreman's story.
Yeah. But I know this is the Youth Pastors Network that you're doing, and I'm on a design team for gaming and esports, and I think that might be something to talk about, Doug, is because gaming is becoming one of the most popular sports in the world. And, I think what I read was over 2.6 billion people say they game. They're into gaming.
2.6 billion.
And if we really want to reach billion, yes. Yep. And you're beginning to see more of it. I went to the Halo tournament recently, one of the big Halo tournaments here recently, and just trying to understand it more. But high schools and colleges are now having esports clubs and teams, sports teams in college, and now from our chapters across the country, they're beginning to do these outreach tournaments. And so I'm part of that, and we're in the middle of testing what that looks like. But if you're a youth pastor, if you've listened to this much of the interview, there's a ministry called Slingshot, and he will produce and help you organize a gaming tournament at your church. And I think it's fantastic. There's different ways to do it, but there's so many of the guys and girls that are, if you really want to reach them, how do you get them out of their home? How do you reach them and find them where they're living? And they're living in the gaming world.
Yes.
So we're in the process of, I was just in Orlando for a global gathering of 23 countries that were represented, all about trying to launch these gaming and esports ministries around the world. It's awesome.
And by the way, Larry lives in in Orlando. I mean, really near UCF and all of that stuff, and the airport. I mean, just that's where the office is for CRU, the main national office. Just kind of give you perspective if you're listening to this. Now, he bounces all over the world and that sort of thing, as we've talked about here. But this is amazing. I'm so glad you talked to us about this, because you're right. If you're working in student ministry now, you know what Larry's talking about, because it's all around you. And if there's 2.6 billion people, it's affected all of our churches and our communities. In fact, even in our little town of Eustis, there was a major animation, gaming animation business that came out of our little high school, but attracted guys from Pixar and one of the other major animation groups.
DreamWorks.
I think DreamWorks was part of it, and they ended up here in fact, in our friend Jim Bazinski's building. They ended up landing there for quite a while. So, Larry, you're full of information and about things that are affecting us in our world spiritually and physically, world-changing things, which is what I talk about you and Amanda, because you and Amanda are a team. If you're doing it, she's doing it. Your 4 children are involved in it. So what else are we missing? Is there anything else that people don't know about you or about your team, about you and Amanda, or that or your family or ministry that you just think people ought to know?
Yeah. You mentioned UCF, and it's one of the largest colleges in the U.S. And I got a call from the quarterback. He wanted to meet me. I had over last summer. I had no idea that he even knew my name, and why does he want to talk to me? His name is John Rice Plumlee. He's had a really good season this year. Just transferred from Ole Miss, and he was wearing an I Am Second wristband, and it was a way for him to express his faith and to whoever watches him on TV or the kids. But he had heard I lived in Orlando and was connected to I Am Second, and that has been a real treat. We've met a few times at Four Rivers, right across the campus, and I've had a chance to mentor him and let him see that he has a ministry, with all these kids, but when he came from Ole Miss, he plays both football and baseball. He plays 2 sports, and he came here and he was talking about his baseball team here, and he said, when I was Ole Miss, he said, we went to church, all of us went to church together. And he said, I don't, there's not a lot of guys that go to church, on my baseball team at UCF. And I just told him, I said, that's your ministry. And he looked at me and he went, yeah, you're right. And, I just love, we've sponsored 28 college athletes this year with I Am Second. And I just love helping these students think about how to use their sport as a platform to share their faith. And it's been a joy this year, and I've really enjoyed working with John Rice, and so I think that's about it, Doug. But I really appreciate you allowing me to share some of these updates on I Am Second and our huge animation project that we're not supposed to talk about yet, and
hopefully we won't get you in too much trouble.
Yeah, and but I'm really excited in the fact that we can see the finish line to fulfilling the Great Commission, and that's what it's all about. Is that it's on Jesus' heart for us to tell everyone who has never heard the story of Jesus, and I'm excited to be part of that, and to share that with people who didn't know that.
Well, let me tell you, you've Larry. I'll say this to the audience because I feel this way about you, but I am grateful that you allow me to be a part of the knowledge of these things that happen in your life. Grateful that I knew Amanda before you and you guys together to see both sides of that coin. And the reason I always want to interview you and Amanda is because there's so much that people will never know that you've touched that they need to know for several reasons. One is that all of us need to understand that we have a lot more leadership in us than we think we have, that we can reach goals that we are absolutely think are out of our reach or not even in our thought patterns. And the thing that you do is you expand my level of faith thinking, and that's what's going to be happening to people that listen to this, that they're going, oh man, I thought I did something. I thought and by the way, youth pastors, you are youth workers, teachers, anyone else, friends of mine. It's not that you have to do what Larry's doing. It's just that you need people like Larry in your life to make sure that you're doing all that you are supposed to be doing. Does that make sense, Larry?
It sure does, Doug. Mm-hmm.
It's always about having people that are bigger and better than you. I call people like you the scary people in my life. Because we are, what you're doing, if you were to say to me, okay, now you're going to go meet with all the executives in Hollywood, and I'd go, ooh, I don't think I'm ready for that yet. But when you put that seed in my mind, you put that seed about where you've gone and where you are and the quiet spirit that you bring there. Once again, I know there's a fire burning in you going, there's so much to do, not enough time, not enough days. Still got to spend family time. I don't have enough time for any of it. But at the same time but I haven't even scratched the surface. And when I hear you and I thank you, I just want you to know that it's thank you for being a part of this podcast and letting us know that God is doing so much in this world that most people are not ever going to be aware of until we get to heaven. And by the way, Larry mentors a lot of professional athletes. There's so many people that he has mentioned, and we're not going to mention it. Well, Larry, who are a couple of people that you can mention that you have mentored over the years that are in the sports field? Or you don't have to, but if you want to, if that will help anyone, because you've already told us about what happened at UCF, that's a common occurrence for you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter who it is or where, it's who God puts in front of you and what doors open for you. And it could be, so it doesn't have to be a high profile athlete or a successful business person. It's just whoever God puts in front of you. And when you know that God wants you to spend time with this person, that's, it becomes an issue of just being obedient and to what God wants you to do.
That's right. And that's what a humble man would say. And so thank you. And I want to remind youth workers this. Every middle schooler you're working with, every high schooler you're working with needs to be treated as though they are the next thing that God, or next person that God's going to use to change an entire world. And the very one that you discount is the one he's going to use. So when you're working with these students, understand that every person Larry's talking about, all these great people, himself included and Amanda, were middle schools. Amanda was in elementary school when I met her for the first time. All of them have the potential to be world changers, and you are the catalyst to making that happen. Larry, thank you so much for doing this today. How can people get in touch with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me, message me, or on Facebook. And so, or you can reach me directly. My cell phone is 407-719-6915. You can always just dial me.
Or text him.
Or text me. Oh, yeah.
So probably better text him first because he'd like to know who he's talking to. So,
yeah, that's true. There's so many spam random calls these days. Isn't that crazy?
It is. It is insane. Hey, listen, love you, brother, and go give Amanda and your kids a hug for me and tell them thank you so much for letting me have this time with you.
Love you too, Doug. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.